Hey guys, Rollout here, and welcome back to Builder's Block. It's another one of those weeks again where I got wrapped up in a project or two, so I've only got a couple of individual creations to show off. Not a whole lot of robots this time, but if you're here for Transformers, I'd recommend sticking around until the end, because I'm planning something that's a little surprising. If you like what we do here, please consider supporting the show on Patreon. I post daily content over there, and it starts at just $1 a month. With that out of the way, the fire calls to us. So let's get started. I apologize in advance that pretty much everything I built this week is from Promare. I'm sorry if you don't know what any of this is, but please tolerate my current obsession for the moment. At the very least, I wanted to build a Leo Photia in his mad burnish armor to face off against Gallo in the Matoi tech. And I started by building the head to make sure that I could get something at least relatively recognizable at this scale, because if I couldn't, then I don't think the rest would have been worth building. But I came up with this, and I think it's all right. He has these 3 fiery horns on his head. He has this toothy grin that is actually a visor for the helmet of his armor, and I'm not sure if that translates super well here, but if you know the source material, I think it's recognizable enough. He also has very distinct feet. They're pointed V shapes that he magically balances on, and I wanted to make sure I could capture that as well. So this is one of his legs. This is what I came up with. I would refine it a little bit later, but for now, I just wanted to get him standing, which surprisingly he can do. The feet I made wide enough for him to be able to stand up on them, even though in the movie they are a little bit smaller than this, and it's a little more impossible. But I just kind of sketch built the rest of his body so I could gauge the scale here and stand him up next to the Matoi tech. Now, the scale between Leo and the Matoi tech is super inconsistent in the movie. There are some shots where they're about the same height. There are other shots where the Matoi tech is massive compared to Leo, and then vice versa. Occasionally, Leo is inexplicably gigantic next to the mech. And so I decided to just kind of make them relatively the same height. I think the fact that the Matoi tech is wider and more massive is a fair compromise. On the next day, I decided to kind of refine everything and build the rest of his body. And here is what he looks like. Like I said, I did change the feet a little bit, and yeah, he can still stand, which is very surprising. All it takes is to kind of tripod him. He has to kind of step forward a little bit, but as long as you get, 3 points of contact on the ground between his 2 feet, he can stand, which is kind of cool. And not only that, he can stand in poses. Here he is posed with his sword, which is improperly colored. That will be kind of a very light green. They do make that element in the yellowish green color, which I think will work pretty well for that. But yeah, as long as you find his center of balance and you kind of finesse his feet a little bit, once you get him standing like this, he's actually pretty solid. And that's not something I was expecting at all. He's also quite posable. Another thing that was very important to me is that he had waist articulation. And to accomplish that, I had to kind of attach it to a robot hand that pulls out to give him a much longer waist section that can then tilt left and right. Before, I had his torso a lot longer, and it just kind of looked weird, but I found this way to collapse it, and I'm very proud of that. It allows him to bend to one side, which is very important for capturing his iconic leaning pose that he does here. Alternatively, this could be achieved with a neck joint that tilts left and right, but the way I have him built, unfortunately, that isn't quite possible. So I have to rely on that waist joint. And again, I'm pretty happy with the way that this has turned out. On the next day, I decided to build Lucia's little lighthouse drone thing that she flies around. The engineer of the Matoi tech supports Gallo with this little helicopter shaped like a lighthouse or a tower. I'm not really sure what that's in reference to. I'm guessing it has something to do with the feudal Japan firefighters that the Matoi tech is based on. Maybe they had towers for their order of operations or something like that, so they could look across towns and see if there were fires in the distance, something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, her little drone is shaped like a lighthouse. I also made a couple small changes to Leo at this point. I changed the shape of his visor. I've also decided to use this Unikitty piece for his head, which I think sets the horn a little bit too far back, but I think it's worth it because it adds to the overall shape of his head and gives it a little bit more mass. Anyway, here is another shot of the lighthouse using a different piece for the top, which I think is actually more accurate. The only problem is that it does not come in red. It should be red, but these little pyramid pieces do not come in that color yet, which is incredible to me, and I'm sure it will happen eventually. I've just gotta wait for it. It does come in brown, and I'm thinking of possibly settling for that, but until then, I think this fez piece is okay. Again, the rooftop is supposed to be a pyramid shape, but I'd rather it be more properly colored, and I think the dark red is good enough. Here it is with the Matoi tech. It kind of flies around and supports Gallo, like I said. I did get one of my Bricklink orders for the Matoi tech in, so you can see that the chin area is now all properly colored with the orange and the gold. All that's left to do is get the minifigure parts I need to properly represent Gallo inside. I'll do one more update on this when those pieces arrive before I do a showcase. On the next day, I wasn't sure if I was gonna do this, but I kind of caved in. I had an idea for it, and I decided to give it a shot. Here is Leo's fiery throne that he summons. This pose makes a little bit more sense now because he is sitting in a throne here when he does it. I had this idea of just throwing all of the jumper plates at it to create these very interesting shapes, and I think it works. Of course, this is not colored properly whatsoever. It's gonna be kind of a light blue color with some pink added in, but for right now, I'm just using what I got so I can come up with the basic structure of it before making a massive, ridiculous Bricklink order with over 100 jumper plates I need for this. Which is going to be kind of crazy, but I think it's worth it for the display. Here is the throne by itself. At this point, all of these little spikes come off of the back. I would change that a little bit later on, but I am quite happy with the shape of the base of it itself. It does have these little triangle details all over it. It is a little bit downsized. The throne is supposed to be much more massive, but I think that this is good enough for conveying the idea for a general display. Here it is from the back as well, and here it is from the top, so you can kind of see the curves of those jumper plates, what you're able to achieve with that. Now, I thought I was pretty much done with this, but I became obsessed with this the next day. I just couldn't help myself from completely pulling it apart and putting it back together until I was satisfied with it so that I could make the build more efficient, so that I could make the shape more accurate, so it could have more depth to it. And so this is what I changed it to look like. And I'm much more happy with this. I think the overall shape is a lot better. I brought some of those crystalline spikes forward so that he actually has something to lean on. And again, so that the throne just has a lot more depth to it. I think I'm quite happy with the way this looks, and I will go ahead and make my bricklink orders on it now so that I can get it in the proper colors. You can see I changed how I approached those triangles at the base so that they could be split up so that now all of them can be the same color without it ruining the shape, so that that's still conveyed, I suppose. Here it is from the back. Again, it has a little bit nicer of a shape. It's a little less rudimentary. And then, of course, here is Leo sitting in it. Like I said, he now has something for his arm to lean on, which makes a little bit more sense. And it kind of just wraps around him a little bit more, which I really, really like. Okay, so on the last day, I finally did something different. I built a completely normal ATV. And I know that sounds suspicious, but it doesn't transform into anything at all. And I know that sounds even more suspicious, but it's the truth. It doesn't. It doesn't transform. It's just an ATV. But I have plans for this. You see, I would like to build a reimagined donut to go with Quickstop. And I'd really like him to be an ATV. I think that's a clever spin on his name and his alt mode, and I'd really like to make that happen. But the thing is I want him to be quite small compared to Quickstop. Now, I know that this is a massive ATV here compared to a bus, but as long as he is smaller than Quickstop, I think that's good enough. And this is about the size that I'd like him to be. So I've built this as kind of a reference model so that I know what my size constraints are. And I can use this in order to brainstorm a transformation within these size limitations. So he is obviously 3 wide without the wheels, and then 6 long about, which is super limiting. I think it's going to be quite challenging to come up with a transformation for this that is up to the quality of Quickstop, because I'd love them to look good together, and I'd love it to have a clever transformation that is, interesting on the same level that Quickstop's is. Like I said, it is going to be a challenge, but I'd love to give it a shot, and this is the first step towards that. So, having both Leo and the Matoy built is good enough. I think it's an acceptable place to stop. It makes for a good display at conventions or up on the shelf. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little tempted to build all of the Mad Burnish and their motorcycles, or the rest of Burning Rescue and their mechs, Vulcan and the Freeze Force, Leo, DeGallon, Crazer X. There's a lot of untapped potential. But we'll see. Go check out Promare. Special thanks to all of my Patreon supporters, especially my leader class patrons, Valraven, Beyond the Brick, and Beta. Until next time, this has been Rollout, signing off.